Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk about playing with chaos to get unstuck in piano playing and in the rest of your life. And I'm in Dumbo today. It's a very, very nice day. And on this channel I hope to share with you strategies, mindsets, methods, and so on to help you in piano playing, hopefully in other areas as well. So this is one of my favorite concepts to play with. In case you're wondering what I mean about chaos, usually people are talking about creating routines. What do I do for my practice routine? What do I do, on a daily basis during my practice? How do I get more organized? How do I get my schedule more in order and so on? And these things are definitely relevant as well. This is kind of the opposite type of thinking. And it doesn't mean you should use it all the time. There's a limit to everything, but it's especially useful for if you feel stuck, if you feel like you've been doing the same thing over and over and nothing seems to be changing. Especially even if you're like consistent, for instance, and you're putting in these inputs and it doesn't seem to be resulting in different outputs. Let's say that you're practicing passages in your music in the same way and you feel like nothing's really changing. You're not really sure why you can't get beyond a certain level. You might want to introduce some random, chaotic, weird, out there elements. And sometimes people will just start doing this naturally because your body or your mind or your way of life or being, you're trying to get back to a state of normalcy that you can accept. Like you realize that the efforts you're putting in, it's not resulting in the outputs that you're intending, it's not resulting in the quality that you're intending, and so you may find yourself doing all sorts of random things, like not wanting to practice, like practicing very differently. I mean, sometimes it manifests in terms of somebody's like midlife crisis or third life crisis, quarter life crisis, right? They suddenly start like backpacking everywhere, or they suddenly start changing the way that they dress, changing the way that they act, and so on. And sometimes people think that this is like a cry for help or some sort of, seriously bad thing. And I really think that it isn't. I mean, if it gets too out of control and the person's not kind of aware of what's happening, if they're not intending to do it, that could be bad. But I think if you recognize it for what it is, which is healthy experimentation, if it's not allowed to get out of control, you can even do it on purpose, and it can lead you to a new way of being, a new way of practicing much sooner. Because in your practice, you should always be running little experiments, observing what's happening, gathering data, running new experiments, and so on. But the reason why things are staying so much the same probably is that you're not being creative enough in your experimentation. Like your range of things that you're trying, either you're doing the same exact thing each time, or you're not varying them enough. So when you introduce chaos and randomness, you do things you wouldn't normally do. At the very least, you're going to get, dramatically different results. So, for instance, in terms of playing, let's just take like the concept of scales. You could try to have entire practice sessions full of scales. You could have 80% scales and 20% pieces. You could have 20% scales and 80% pieces. You could have 1% scales and 99% pieces, right? So this is just one idea, and for this particular idea, you could do each experiment as like a one-off, like you just do it one time. You could do each one as an experiment for maybe 2 or 3 weeks or longer, right? So it really depends how long you want to run the experiments, and this depends on how well you know yourself, how much time, energy you're willing to invest into each experiment, and you'll gain a lot of valuable data this way. For instance, let's say you do 80% scales, 20% pieces, and you're like, wow, this result is way worse than before, or it's way better than before, or I enjoyed it way more than before, right? And then you try another thing and you're like, okay, well that definitely was the wrong answer, or I definitely enjoyed that a little bit more. If you're not willing to go to extremes and try things you wouldn't normally try, you might not discover these things, right? So it's up to you how you introduce them, how much you introduce them, how long you do each thing for. I personally like sometimes I like to do random one-offs, like I'm just going to do something that I really don't normally do. For instance, if you're like a morning person, you might try practicing very, very late at night, or if you're a night person, you might try practicing at 4 or 5 in the morning at least one time just to see what it's like. And if these experiments in miniature, if they prove to be fruitful, you can try them for longer spans of time, right? You could try being like getting up at 4 in the morning to practice for like an entire week if you can muster that. You can can try practicing, at midnight or 1 in the morning at the very, very end of the day for like a week, if you can muster that. You can try everything in between. You can try 10 different practice sessions throughout the day, if that's even possible, as opposed to 2 different practice sessions, because it is good to break up your practice. So lots and lots of different ideas. And you could go on YouTube and search for different channels, and people have very, very different opinions about practice routines, right? If you just search practice routines right now, you could try each one for 2 weeks each. You can find this person's channel and be like, okay, I'm going to follow exactly what she's saying, and follow everything to the letter, and see what your results are after those 2 weeks. Then pick another channel, follow what that guy is saying. Maybe that guy is saying the total opposite. Follow that religiously for 2 weeks, and then maybe you find yet a third channel that maybe some things are similar, some things are completely different. Follow that for 2 weeks, and just observe your results. You can do it with 3 different pieces, for instance. And you can try things where you just, you work on a new piece each week, and then you just leave it at the end of each week, and you see, you could do that in combination with the channels. You could do it separately. You could just choose just one method and, try 5, 6 different pieces, each one taking a few days or each one taking a week, and see which one brings you the most happiness, right? So the types of experimentation, the types of chaos that you introduce in these experiments, or thought experiments, whatever you want to call them, it's only limited by your imagination. And I would say it's the same thing with general life things as well too. I forget, it must have been an article or something like that, but there was somebody that mastered a different skill, every month or something like that, like solving Rubik's Cubes 1 month, and then the next one maybe it's learning to ride a unicycle, or I don't know. These it might not be accurate, these specific examples, but I feel like at least the Rubik's Cube is one of them, and I'm sure there are other people that have done something similar. I've seen things about mastering skills in 21 days. I don't know if you can say master, but let's say that you try a different craft or a different skill every month for a year, every month for 2 years, every 2 weeks for a year. It is very likely you'll come across something, anything that you're like, wow, this really does bring me joy. My life is better with it than without it. And so that'll become a part of your life. It'll become a recurring part of your life. It might just be a 2% time investment out of your total time, but that thing that you discovered as a result of this chaotic experimentation, it could make your entire life better for many, many years to come. So whether it's a life thing that totally changed, it could be a work thing, right? You could be having some sort of side hustle or side project, some, a coding thing or an entrepreneurial thing, or, maybe just something to advance your current career, maybe another job or career you might be interested in, and you just read, an article about that once a week or something. You could happen upon something huge, especially if it's something that you wouldn't normally have done in your regular routine. So, and anything that you learn, and I think about this all the time, if I had experimented with the life things the way that I just talked about just now, I would think, well, how can I do the same thing in piano playing, right? If I'm conducting little experiments like that, what can I do 1 week at a time in my piano playing? It might even be different sections of the same piece that I choose to practice in dramatically different ways. And I think the thing with chaos, though, is that the experiments are going to be a lot more out there than they normally would be. And sometimes it can honestly even be completely random. I've seen things in terms of people getting writer's block where they suggest, I forget who suggested this first, maybe somebody can tell me in the comments, just, taking a random book off of your bookshelf and then just opening to a random page and then reading a random word or phrase. And that is what unsticks you and, solves your writer's block. I don't know what the exact equivalent would be in piano playing. I guess that'd probably be searching some random term on YouTube and, finding some random channel or whatever. And it could be piano related and it could not be piano related, and thinking how can this cause me to think differently about piano playing, for instance? How can this influence my practice? So there's no right or wrong answers here. You don't worry about things making sense. Nothing has to become part of your routine. You just have to be in this super creative, super innovative sort of state of mind. Anyway, hope you found some of these ideas helpful. Let me know what sort of chaos you introduce in your practicing or in the rest of your life. I feel like there have been many times in my life where I've thrived on chaos. Like I've practiced a particular way up to a certain point, and then I'll think to myself something like, why do I assume that I have to continue doing things this way in order to get certain results? What if I just did like the total opposite of it? Let's try that for a little while. Sometimes it, of course, doesn't result in anything or it's a total disaster. Other times I have a breakthrough and I really will do the opposite. And other times I think, oh, there's an aspect of this opposite way of practicing that I'm going to keep, and then add that to what I was doing originally, right? So I just think, what is the type of thing that I'm least likely to do? And then I just go ahead and go 100% in that direction, at least for a while, right? So think about, what is a possibility in my practice? What is a possibility in, you know, my regular life routine that normally I would never think of? That's not me, right? We're not limited by the personality that we believe ourselves to have. There's no reason that you have to, like, just because you think that you're like a shy person, it doesn't mean that you must practice only in these 7 different ways. That's just a construct that we've created for ourselves. So once you open yourself up to other possibilities, like if somebody had the opposite personality, how would they practice normally? If somebody had the opposite personality, how would they act normally in this situation? What if I'm a morning instead of night person, or the opposite? It'll open up just way more possibilities, way more variables in your piano and life experiments. So I hope this is helpful, and if you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, let people know about the channel, let me know what I should talk about next.